Hello friends and welcome to Hitbullseye. My name is Manish and welcome to the CUET session in which we have been discussing various topics of political science. So in case you haven't watched the previous videos, we have discussed a lot of topics from the CUET Political Science 12th standard. You can watch all those episodes on this channel. And in this class, we are going to take the matter further and we are going to discuss about globalization. We have already discussed the Cold War, the bipolar era, the unipolar world, the hegemony of USA, the Cuban Missile Crisis, everything that there was. And we have also discussed security in the contemporary world and the latest climate challenges. So with this particular class, we will be kind of concluding the entire book 1 of the 12th standard NCERT, and I haven't been teaching you what all is there. I have been giving you an overview of the way you have to prepare, and so as to make you understand, so that if you haven't read these topics even once, it will help you build a context for that particular topic. That is the purpose of why we are doing this video series, and if it is helpful to you in any way, we are more than happy for that. So talking of globalization, if I jump straight onto the topic, globalization basically means, and it includes the word global, which again has come from the word globe. What is globe? Planet Earth, basically. This is what we are referring to. So when we globalize something, that means there is something which is common throughout the world. That is globalization. Globalization. So globalization means anything that is common or that is easily accessible or that flows throughout the globe. Earlier it was not possible. If we talk about the ancient and medieval times, it was obviously not possible because the technology was not that great. The means of communication, the means of transportation were not that fast. Unlike now, when we are actually looking at real-time communication in any part of the world, that too in HD, and not for transportation. Transportation is not real time, but of course in less than 24 hours you can be in any part of the world. That is the kind of capability we have. So globalization basically means when things can flow easily, flow throughout the globe. That is globalization, and that is what this picture also signifies. This picture, this is globe, and this is like the flow that is being depicted. The flow of what? 4 things. Ideas. Flow of ideas. One person sitting in one part of the globe has an idea that he or she knows can revolutionize the world. That idea can be implemented by someone sitting on the other part of the world, with the help of someone sitting in yet another part of the world, and with a team that may be sitting in like 50 people in 50 different countries maybe. But when that idea becomes a reality, when that idea is executed, it has something substantial that comes out of it, and it has an impact. Can be positive, can be negative, on every person in the world. That is an idea. That is what is possible in globalization. Then for example, let's take an example of one positive and one negative idea. One positive idea could be internet. Internet could be one positive idea. So Tim Berners-Lee, when he thought of www for the first time, the World Wide Web, he could not execute it himself. So he had a team of people who belonged to different countries. He was able to communicate with them. He was able to travel to different parts of the world. He was able to execute that idea. And it is because of that idea's execution that the world has seen a revolution of sorts with the internet coming into reality. If we talk about a negative idea becoming a reality, it could be terrorism maybe. So one person sitting in some part of the world, sometime hundreds of years back, had this idea that I need to terrorize people, I need to instill terror and fear into their minds, I want to take my so-called revenge or something. and for this I will start killing people, I will start detonating bombs, I'll start hijacking planes. And these kind of ideas found like-minded people in other parts of the world due to means of communication and due to means of transportation. And that is how people, like-minded people with terror mentality, they came together. And we have Lashkar-e-Taiba, we have Jaish-e-Mohammed, we have Al-Qaeda, and God knows what not. So this is also an example of something negative coming out of a particular idea due to globalization. The flow of capital. Now this is something that led to colonialism in the first place. The flow of capital. This is a negative that I'm talking about first. So flow of capital from one part of the world to another. Money finds its way negatively. Various European countries, including Britain, France, Spain, Portugal, they started investing in other parts of the world in anticipation of returns. And during that process, they started ruling over those countries. They started looking for, new ways of, enslaving the people and, using the other territory for the parent country's gain, which we call mercantilism or mercantile capitalism. So capital has flown from one part of the world to other parts for negative purposes, maybe for destruction, maybe for evangelization, maybe for some other destructive purposes, maybe for terrorism, for money laundering, for terror financing, anything it could be, and for positives also. Capital flowing from one part of the world to the other, like the foreign direct investment, the foreign institutional investment that leads to generation of jobs, that leads to generation of wealth, GDP, economic prosperity, maybe wealth traveling from one part of the world to another for the sake of charity, for the sake of educational development, healthcare development, UN peacekeeping missions, and whatnot. So every dimension of globalization can have positives as well as negatives. This is something which is a given. The flow of commodities from one part of the world to the other. This is manifested in world trade. The amount of imports and exports of commodities and even services that we are seeing in 21st century is unprecedented. We had never anticipated, in fact not even 100 years back, that the level of trade in goods and services will reach to such a level. But all thanks to globalization, we can eat a McDonald's burger sitting in our homes that we have ordered from Amazon, right? Along with it comes a Coke, so every product coming from, outside of India, maybe in a company that has originated in some other country. We can have imported items from other countries. We use an iPhone, we use a Nokia coming from, Finland, iPhone coming from USA. We drive a Toyota, we drive a Honda coming from other countries like Japan. So commodity exchange has changed the way people perceive the world, has changed the way cultures interact, has changed the way we perceive our own life. That is the power of globalization. And finally, the most important one, the flow of people around the world, whether it is colonialism, whether it is any era in the world. If we talk about the Indus Valley civilization, the Sumerian civilization, the Greek and Roman civilizations, even during those times, people went from one part of the world to the other. But it is the pace of that flow, it is the degree of that flow, and it is the speed of that flow that has increased, unprecedentedly. There was a time when it used to take months to travel from one part to the other part of the world. Now it takes a few hours or maybe a few minutes. That is the extent to which we have gone. So the flow of these four things, with their own negatives and their own positives, is what we call globalization. This, I think, is the most comprehensive definition of globalization. It's a multi-dimensional concept. So when we talk about globalization, there is not just one dimension that we are talking about. It is not just economy that we are talking about. We are also talking about cultural exchange. We are also talking about political scenarios being changed. We are talking about impacts on environment and ecology. So it is not only economy that we are talking about. economy, ecology, technology, politics, society, culture, everything gets impacted when these four things flow throughout the world. So it's a multi-dimensional concept, and its impact on every person, every society, every country is different, depending upon an umpteen number of facts, depending upon the sender and depending upon the receiver as well. So it has an uneven impact. That is what makes it complicated. If it was, that simple, then the impact would have been common throughout the world, but it is not so. So uneven impact is what makes it really complicated. So this is what globalization is, the flow of all these things. What are the causes of globalization? Now you'll be surprised to hear that globalization is not a new phenomenon. You heard it right. We think that globalization is something that started, maybe 200 years back, or maybe in the last 100 years, or maybe 300-400 years back when colonialism started. It is all wrong. The pace of globalization has increased, but it does not mean that globalization did not exist earlier. Scientific evidence, establishes the fact that the first human beings were there in African continent. So they must have traveled to other places of the world. That's how the world got populated. The earliest traces of human civilization are found in the African continent near Tanzania, where Neanderthals and hominins were found. So they must have traveled to other parts of the world, like 50,000 years back or maybe 60,000 years back. So the entire world has seen interactions of civilizations. In fact, when we talk about the Indus Valley civilization, which existed in India about 5,000 years back, we have records, scientific evidence to prove that the Indus Valley civilization had connections with other civilizations of the world who were existing at that time. Maybe it was the Sumerian civilization, maybe it was the Iranian civilization, it was the Greek, and Roman civilizations, or the civilization which was prevalent in China at that time. So we had interactions with those civilizations as well, which means it was also a form of globalization. The Silk Route that extends from India all the way to China and Europe through the Middle East, the Silk Route is a testimony to the fact that globalization is not a recent phenomenon. However, we have started talking about globalization in the last a couple of 100 years because the speed, the momentum, the depth and the width of globalization has increased millions of times more than what it was earlier. So let's say, if in the earlier times it used to take 2 months to travel from India to, let's say, Greece, now it takes not more than 10 hours or maybe 15 hours. That is the level to which we have gone in technological advancement. So what are the causes of globalization? Technological advancement, in which primarily we are talking about the means of transportation, and the means of communication. These are the two things that have revolutionized everything, and this is the most important cause of globalization. If you exclude these two things, globalization wouldn't be the same. There would still be globalization, but it won't be the same. So if there is someone that is near or dear to you, maybe your family member who is living in another part of the world, there are only two ways that make you feel closer. One, the way you communicate. You ring a phone, or you talk over the internet, or video call, which has become quite possible now. Or you can travel to that location, or you can be assured that if that person books a ticket today, maybe tomorrow or day after tomorrow, that person will be back home. But if you exclude these two things, do you think that globalization is as easy as it was, as it looks like now? So say you send a letter. Let's go back to 200 years. So let's say you send a letter to the one who is living abroad. God knows when the letter will reach, and God knows if the letter will reach or not. And if it does, you will get a reply back, God knows how many months later. So you want to go to that place, you have to take a boat, or maybe you have to go from the road through some bullock cart or maybe something like that, and it will take you months to reach that place and months to come back. So it is the means of transportation and communication, these two things that have revolutionized the way globalization is. In fact, even ideas, not only people, commodities and money, even ideas travel faster when means of transportation and communication are there. In communication, we are already reached a real time. It cannot be faster. So if I am speaking something and you are, let's say, the one who is watching this video, let's say you are sitting in USA and I am in India. So you are experiencing it exactly at the same time as I am speaking it. Maybe 1 or 2 seconds of latency, you can say, or maybe a few seconds more. That is the extent to which we have gone in communication. In transportation, we are improving even more. The jet planes, their speed is, increasing every year by a few knots, by a few 100 kilometers. So this process is the most important factor that has caused globalization. And second, problems without passports. It is also a cause and effect both. So problems without passports means there are things that have brought the humanity together. It can be pandemics like COVID-19. It can be terrorism. The things that do not care about political boundaries or climate change. These are the things that are problems without passports, and they require solutions without passports. And because globalization has made this possible. Now just imagine, had globalization not happened at the pace at which it is now, let's say transportation and communication were not that frequent, or let's just presume that transportation medium was not that efficient as they are now, do you think COVID would have spread at the same rate as it did? The first case came out, and by the time the world knew, millions of people had been infected. And in a month, in 2 months, in 3 months, over 1 billion people were infected. How was that possible? Because people are traveling so fast and so frequently between different countries that it spread really, really fast. Had globalization not been there, then this could have been controlled to a great extent. Like in earlier times when we used to hear about the Spanish flu, or maybe the plague that was prevalent about 200 years ago. Those diseases did not spread to far off locations. They killed people in a specific area. But COVID-19 had impact all over the world because of globalization. So this is not to paint the picture in a negative way, of course. There are so many positives also. The positive being that vaccines developed in one part of the world impacted billions of lives throughout the world, and saved a lot more lives than we lost. That is also a positive. But these are the causes of globalization. Now, if globalization is caused, the consequences cannot be far behind. When ideas, people, money, and commodities travel freely throughout the world, it has a lot of consequences. Again, positive as well as negative. So if we talk about the political consequences of globalization, some people say it has led to erosion of state capacity, in the sense that until globalization was there, the state had complete control over economy, society, polity, everything. But due to the pervasive nature of multinational corporations or privatization of so many public sector enterprises, the government is slowly losing control over people or people's lives. And if government was controlling people's lives, it was seen as welfareist government. But now it is seen as a corporatized government. There are both ways of looking at it. Nothing good, nothing bad. So erosion of state capacity is one allegation that is there. However, the states continue to be important. It does not mean that a company is running a state. That has never been the case. We haven't seen that yet. So states do continue to be important, at least in matters like law and order, or matters like education, healthcare, defense, external affairs, things like that. And e-governance, in fact, the technology in governance has made the delivery of services from the government to the citizens really, really seamless. So if we want to paint things in a good way, or we want to see a rosy picture of everything, then political consequence has been more positive than negative. We have seen good political ideas traveling throughout the world. Like for example, the concept of there can be so many examples, like the parliamentary committees for greater deliberations on parliamentary laws before they are introduced in the parliament. This concept we have taken from Britain, and it has been adopted in various countries across the world. And any good idea, it transmits really fast. Not to say that the bad ones don't, but good ideas also get transmitted really, really fast. E-governance is a similar idea. Then economic consequences. Now this is something that is very interesting, because it is widely believed that globalization has the most impact on economic consequence on the world, let's say. So if you look at this cartoon, this is a pun on economic consequences. So it says, when European workers are losing their jobs, because of an Asian stock market crash, that's the meaning of globalization. So it means if something bad happens in one part of the world, it also has an impact on people in other parts of the world. So this here they are talking about the 1998 Asian financial crisis. It happened in the Southeast Asian countries like Indonesia, Singapore, etc. So its impact was felt throughout the world, because by that time these Asian countries had become properly integrated with the global system, and so many European and North American people had invested their money in the Asian stock markets. And when these markets fell, economies in those countries also suffered, and as a result people lost their jobs in large numbers. So in such a time, the role of international financial institutions or international economic institutions like the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, the World Trade Organizations, the role of these institutions become really, really important. So the first consequence of globalization is the increasing role of international institutions. Like for example, in any aspect we can say, so during COVID-19, we saw the increasing role of World Health Organization. Similarly, whenever an economic crisis happens, the role of World Trade Organization, IMF or World Bank is accentuated. That is the one consequence. Now there is nothing actually bad or good about it. It's a way of looking at it. Greater economic flows. Of course, foreign capital flows really smoothly between the countries. So greater economic flow is a consequence. Flow of capital, people, ideas and commodities again. And the state withdrawal. Now this is a negative. Again, one of the economic consequences of globalization is it is believed that when a country starts relegating or a government starts relegating its duties and responsibilities to private corporations, that is a negative of globalization. Well, who knows where it happens, where it doesn't, but it is indeed a worrying phenomenon. So state should at least take care of the core sectors of the economy which it cannot or should not lend to the private enterprises. So critical sectors should be left out of this. Then of course the cultural consequences. So this here is a picture from the recent protests that are going on in Iran. So in Iran there are anti-hijab protests that are going on. So for example, these women, they are carrying this poster which says, "Did you know that letting your hair blow in the wind is a crime in Iran?" So there's a this hijab is mandatory in Iran, or burqa you can say is mandatory in Iran. So women cannot have their hair open. So this is their culture maybe, but these women now understand the freedom that women enjoy in other parts of the world like USA or Europe or India or any other liberal country. So some of them do not want to follow that law. So they started protesting against hijab. Now one of those activists were killed. Her name was Mahsa Amini. So when she was killed, thousands of Iranian women came on the street and they removed their hijab. Some of them started cutting their hair also, as a way of protest against the Iranian law. So cultural clashes happen when comparisons happen, that this is happening in our country but something else is happening in another country, so why can't we be that free? Generally the repressive, regressive regimes or authoritarian regimes feel the heat, because then they are compared with the liberal societies of the world, and this is how ideas travel from one part of the world to the other. So cultural consequences of globalization is something that is the most complicated topic. Also, there are allegations of cultural homogenization, that the entire world is becoming like a singular identity. The uniqueness of cultures is being lost. This is also something that is said. Imposition of Western culture is another allegation, and this allegation holds true to a certain extent because of the fact that due to colonization, more than half the countries of the world were ruled by Britain or France or Spain or Portugal, which were all European countries. So their influence on their colonies and their culture cannot be denied. For example, we are Indians, but I'm speaking in English and most of you are also Indians, so you're understanding whatever all I'm saying, which means that the level of linguistic superiority that British enjoyed in India is unparalleled, because our education system, our legal system, our police system, railway system, civil services, everything has great influence from the Britain, and similarly for many other countries as well. So imposition of Western culture, we wear the jeans, the pair of jeans we wear, we eat burgers, we drink the aerated beverages, we use air conditioners, we drive foreign imported cars. So all these are the Western influence, in our eating habits, in our dressing habits, in what we study, in what we read, in how we entertain ourselves, in the movies that we watch. All these things has a Western influence to a great extent, which is sometimes also called McDonaldization of the world. McDonaldization is a term that is specifically used to show the soft power influence of USA on the world. So whether it is the degree of MBA, whether it is the blue jeans, whether it is McDonald's burger, or whether it is Coca-Cola, all these are the products that are, what you can say, they are like equally acceptable in every part of the world. So which shows that under the garb of globalization, you can say, or due to globalization, the stronger culture tries to overpower the weaker culture. But the weaker culture does not mean a bad culture. Weaker culture simply means that it does not have the power of economy to take it forward. It does not mean that African countries do not have a good culture. It's just that their culture is weak. They are not able to propagate it well. But the countries which have economic power, they can propagate that culture onto the other parts of the world, and hence they culturally become superior, or they culturally become dominating on the other cultures. This is an allegation that globalization carries. However, there are certain positives as well. Cultural accommodation and appreciation for diversity also we have witnessed in large numbers. But for that to happen, it to a large extent depends upon the individual. So for example, if you are young, if you are educated, if you have a liberal mindset, then you will be appreciating every culture, every race. You will be appreciative of the fact that this person speaks a different language, this person looks a bit different, this person has different tastes and preferences. So cultural accommodation and appreciation for diversity also is a big positive of globalization. In fact, the younger generation who are well-read, well-educated and well-mannered, they actually appreciate diversity and they enjoy it. So that is something that is a positive, and if we can focus on that more, that is the way forward actually. So cultural consequences, again positive as well as negative. Now if we talk about India and globalization, first if we read this cartoon here, so it says American plastic waste on a European beach. Wow, globalization works. So this again is a pun which intends to criticize the ecological consequences of globalization, and this has been included in this slide specifically because it is alleged that India has to deal with, or India has had to deal with, a lot of ecological and environmental consequences due to globalization happening in other parts of the world. There has been dumping of waste in India, or dumping of unwanted material in India, but no longer. We are now resisting it. So during colonialism, the kind of globalization we saw was mercantile capitalism. Our country was being used to ferry raw materials to Britain, and those raw materials were converted into finished products in Britain, and then they were sold back into India. So India was a pawn of globalization, because globalization started in those countries, the European countries. So during the pre-colonial time, or during the pre-independence time, we were the exploited. We were being exploited due to globalization. So before 1947, our idea of globalization was totally negative, and which was rightly so. However, after independence, we were so skeptic of globalization and multinational corporations that we did not allow capitalism or globalization to take flight in India. So our approach was inward looking, our approach was import substitution, our approach was anti-privatization, and hence after independence for a long time we were not able to take advantage of that. Whereas during that time there were certain countries which came out of that mental block, and they really succeeded. Like you can talk about China. In the 1970s they opened up their economy, then Singapore, South Korea, etc. However, post 1991, in 1991 the consequences became very bad for India. So we had to open up our economy, liberalize, privatize, and globalize it. And post 1991 the scenario has changed, and we have started embracing globalization more and more. However, certain sectors still continue to remain reserved for the public, that is for the government, but most of them are like welfare oriented sectors. If we talk about 21st century India, we have started shedding many of those legacies as well. We are opening up defense manufacturing, space sector manufacturing, railways, and defense modernization. The sectors which were considered untouched for the private sector are now being opened for the private sector development. But of course, with proper state regulation, these steps are not going to be harmful for the economy. So this is how India has fared well with globalization, and if it continues to do so, as we have just completed 75 years of independence, and we plan on becoming a developed country in the next 25 years, that is by 2047. If we want to do that, our relationship with globalization has to be really calculated. And it's a fact that whenever the world has become more globalized, it has always benefited India, because India has so much to give to the world. Like for right now, we have started focusing on the toy market, we have started focusing on the defense exports, we have started focusing on semiconductor manufacturing, pharmaceutical manufacturing, food grain exports. So the more globalized the world is, it is always better for India. So if India starts to take advantage, or knows how to take advantage of globalization waves, it can really make the most of it. Sadly, it lost out on the 70s, 80s, 90s wave of globalization when China took all the advantage. But now we are back in the game, and we can do that again. That is all for this class. This is what globalization is. This is, these are the consequences of globalization, both positive and negative, and in the end, India's relationship with globalization. That is all. Thank you so much. This is me, Manish Mittal, signing off.